The alien world of Kelthon was beautiful yet dangerous. Its landscape stretched far and wide, with glowing rivers and towering mountains that seemed to touch the stars. The air was thick with the scent of strange flowers, and the sky above was a swirling mix of colors: green, purple, and gold. It was a world of power, mystery, and ancient secrets. But for Princess Zayra, it was a world that felt both empty and full of questions. Zayra was no ordinary princess. She was strong, intelligent, and capable of commanding legions of soldiers. As the ruler of Kelthon, she had everything any ruler could desire: wealth, land, and an army that could crush any enemy. Yet, despite all her power, there was a nagging emptiness that followed her everywhere she went. She often found herself staring out of her palace window, watching the stars, wondering if there was something more to life than just ruling over a kingdom. One morning, as the sun began to rise, casting a golden glow over the palace, Zayra stood alone in the grand hall. Her long, braided hair shimmered in the sunlight, and her golden armor glowed like a beacon. She looked out over her kingdom, but her mind was far from the busy streets and bustling cities below. She was deep in thought, her mind racing with 1,000 questions. Why do I feel so empty? She asked herself. What am I missing? She turned her gaze to the side, where her husband, Prince Kellan, stood silently. Kellan was a quiet man, always in the background. He had no interest in ruling or leading armies. He was not a warrior like the other men in the palace. In fact, many of the palace staff and even her advisors often referred to him as simple. To most, he seemed like an afterthought, an ordinary man married to a powerful princess. But Zayra couldn't help but feel a strange pull toward him. She had married him out of love. But over time, something in him had started to confuse her. His quiet nature, the way he always stayed in the background, never seeking attention. It was almost too calm, too peaceful. Zayra had grown to believe that he was simply a man who did not want power, someone who was content with a quiet life at her side. He was, after all, nothing like her. He had no ambitions, no plans to take over the throne, no dreams of battle. He was always content, always at peace with the world around him. And yet, there was something about him that made Zayra uneasy. She had often wondered what his true purpose was. Why had he been chosen to be her husband? Surely, someone of his low-key nature couldn't be of any real importance. And yet, there were moments, small fleeting moments, when his eyes would flash with something Zayra couldn't quite put her finger on, an intensity, a knowing. But before she could analyze it, it would vanish, leaving her more confused than ever. That morning, as Zayra stood by the window, her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the palace gates creaking open. A soft sound, but enough to pull her attention back to the present. She turned to see Kellan standing beside her, his usual calm expression on his face. His deep blue eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, Zayra felt a strange shift in the air. He spoke quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "Something's coming," he said simply. Zayra raised an eyebrow. She had expected him to speak of something trivial, but his words struck her. He had never been one to speak of danger or threats. In fact, the last time he had said anything about an incoming threat was years ago, when an enemy fleet had arrived at their borders. His warning had been dismissed by everyone, including Zayra. But when the enemy ships finally appeared, it was Kellan's prediction that had saved them. This was different, though. Zayra was not sure why. But there was something in Kellan's tone that felt different now. It wasn't just the words themselves, it was the way he spoke. The way his eyes seemed to focus in a way she had never seen before. "What do you mean?" Zayra asked. Her voice tinged with curiosity. Kellan's gaze remained steady, as if he was seeing something that Zayra could not. "I can feel it," he said. "The balance of things is shifting. There's a storm coming, and we're at the center of it." Zayra felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had heard the warnings of prophets, of seers, of generals, but never had her husband spoken this way before. There was an intensity in his words, an urgency. It was as if the man she had known for so long had just revealed an entirely new side of himself, a side she had never seen. "Should we prepare the army?" Zayra asked, her voice suddenly sharp with the need for action. Kellan hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet, but be ready. We will need all of our strength to face what's coming. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. What was happening? Why was Kellen speaking this way? Who was he really? Before she could ask another question, a loud explosion echoed from the distance, shaking the palace walls. Zara's eyes widened in alarm. The distant rumble of battle was in the air. Her thoughts raced. Something was coming, something big. But what did it have to do with Kellen? Was this the storm he had predicted? As the first wave of attacks began to hit the palace gates, Zara turned to Kellen. For the first time, she wasn't sure if he was just her husband. Was he something more? Something powerful, something hidden. As chaos erupted around them, Zara realized that she had no choice but to trust him. But did she truly know him? Or had she been blind to the truth all along? The mystery of Kellen was just beginning to unfold. Zara stood in the heart of the palace, surrounded by the chaos of the approaching invasion. The royal halls, once calm and serene, now echoed with the hurried steps of her soldiers and the heavy sound of clashing armor. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but none more troubling than the strange warning her husband, Kellen, had given her. For years, he had been the quiet companion by her side, his presence a comforting constant in her life. But in that moment, as she stood with the weight of her kingdom on her shoulders, she couldn't help but wonder, who was he really? She turned toward Kellen, still standing by the grand window, as calm and composed as ever. His eyes, those deep blue eyes, were fixed on the horizon, where the first signs of the enemy fleet appeared, their dark shapes moving ominously toward the planet. There was no panic in his demeanor, no sense of urgency. But Zara felt a strange unease creeping up her spine. The way he stood, almost detached from the chaos around him, was unlike anything she'd ever seen. "Kellen," she called, her voice firm, trying to steady the nerves building inside her. "Why aren't you helping? We need to prepare for battle." He didn't turn to face her. His gaze remained fixed on the distant ships that seemed to grow larger by the second. "Not yet," he replied quietly, his voice distant and calm. "You're not ready for this, Zara." She frowned, his words feeling like a cold splash of water in the heat of the moment. "What do you mean?" "We're under attack." "I mean you're not ready for what's coming," he said, finally turning to face her. His eyes were different now, no longer the soft, gentle gaze of the man she thought she knew. There was something sharp in them, something that sent a chill down her spine. Before she could speak, the palace doors burst open, and her commanders stormed in, their faces filled with worry. "Your Highness, the enemy has reached the outer walls. They're moving fast, and we need to act now." Zara snapped into action. "Send out the reinforcements. Prepare the defenses. We will not let them breach the palace." But as the soldiers scrambled to carry out her orders, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air itself felt different, heavier, like the calm before a storm. She glanced back at Kellen, still standing by the window, his eyes distant, as though he were in a world of his own. For the first time, Zara wondered what secrets he was keeping. How could he be so calm in the face of such danger? Her soldiers were running, shouting orders, and preparing for battle, but he was unmoved. She moved toward him, her boots echoing softly against the palace floors. "Kellen, tell me what's going on," she demanded, her voice low but firm. "Why do you know so much about this? What aren't you telling me?" He turned to her, his expression unreadable. "You don't need to know yet," he said softly. "But you will. When the time comes, you will understand." Zara's heart skipped a beat. There it was again, his words were like a puzzle, pieces she couldn't fit together no matter how hard she tried. Her husband, the man she had loved and trusted for years, was hiding something. She felt it in her bones, an instinct telling her that this moment, this attack, was connected to him in a way she couldn't yet understand. The palace trembled again, this time from the force of an explosion that shook the walls. Zara's gaze snapped toward the source, and she saw the first wave of enemy soldiers charging toward the gates. Her soldiers were fighting back fiercely, but the enemy's technology was unlike anything they had ever seen. Their weapons were powerful, and the air was filled with the sound of laser fire and explosions. Zara's heart raced as she turned back to Kellen. "We need to act, now," she shouted. Kylie and didn't move. He stood there, watching the battle unfold with a quiet intensity. His eyes flickered for a moment, and Zara thought she saw a flash of something familiar. Something powerful, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "Get to safety." "Zara," he said, his voice calm but insistent. "I'll take care of this." She stared at him in disbelief. "Take care of this how? We're being invaded." "You can't possibly." But before she could finish, Kellen stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. He reached out, his hand glowing faintly with an energy Zara had never seen before. As he touched the air, a shockwave rippled outward, knocking soldiers and enemies alike off their feet. Zara's eyes widened. She had seen power before she commanded an army. After all but this was something else entirely. She had always thought Kellen was nothing more than a simple man, a peaceful soul who didn't belong in the world of warfare and battle. But what she was witnessing now shattered everything she thought she knew about him. "Kellen, what are you doing?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. He didn't answer. Instead, he raised his hand, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. A massive energy field formed around the palace, a glowing barrier that shimmered like a protective shield. The enemy's weapons fired at it, but they bounced off harmlessly. Zara stood frozen, her mind racing to catch up with the reality she was now faced with. Her husband, this quiet, unassuming man, was not only capable of this power, but he seemed to have known all along that it would be needed. "Who are you?" Zara asked, her voice shaking with a mix of awe and fear. Kellen turned to her, his eyes steady. "I am not the man you think I am, Zara, but I am the one who can save this world." The words hit her like a thunderclap. The man she had married, the man she had trusted, was not who he appeared to be. As the battle raged around them, Zara realized that everything she thought she knew about Kellen, about her kingdom, and even about herself was about to change forever. In the midst of the chaos, she could only watch as Kellen stepped forward, his power growing with each passing second. The storm he had predicted was here, and with it, the revelation of secrets buried deep within the very fabric of their world. And Zara, now faced with the truth, had no choice but to follow him into the unknown. The battle outside the palace raged on, the air filled with the deafening sounds of explosions and the clash of weapons. Zara stood at the heart of it all, her mind still reeling from the revelation about her husband. Kellen, he had stepped forward, unleashing an unimaginable power that had sent shockwaves through the battlefield. But now, as the chaos unfolded around them, she couldn't shake the feeling that something even darker was coming. The enemy, a force like none Zara had ever encountered, was relentless. Their technology was far beyond anything her people had ever seen. Their ships, sleek and menacing, hovered above the palace, firing beams of energy that tore through the defenses like paper. The soldiers, though brave, were no match for the onslaught. Zara's heart ached with every loss, every fallen soldier. Her people were strong, but they were not prepared for an enemy like this. She turned back to Kellen, who stood beside her, his expression unreadable. His glowing hand, still pulsing with an otherworldly energy, flickered in the light as he raised it toward the heavens. The shield he had created to protect the palace remained intact, but Zara could see the strain in his face. He was expending more energy than he had ever shown before, and she could feel it. This was only the beginning. "Kellen," she said, her voice trembling, "what are we facing? Who are these people?" He didn't respond immediately. Instead, his eyes narrowed as he focused on the battlefield, scanning the advancing forces. "They are not just invaders," he finally spoke, his voice low and measured. "They are a force from another dimension, a race of beings that have crossed the boundaries between worlds. Their arrival here is no accident, Zara. They've been waiting for this moment." The words hit her like a blow. "Another dimension?" she repeated, the concept foreign and incomprehensible. How could something like that be possible? Kellen's gaze shifted back to the horizon, his face grim. "The balance of the universe is delicate. Our world, your world, is part of something far greater than you can imagine. And now, the fabric of reality itself is beginning to tear." Zara felt a chill crawl up her spine. Reality itself? She had never heard Kellen speak like this. Her mind raced, trying to understand what he was saying. She had always thought of their world as stable, secure, a place where she could protect her people. But now, the very laws of nature were under threat, and her husband, the man she had once believed to be simple and ordinary, was the key to saving everything. Suddenly, a loud explosion shook the palace, rattling the walls and sending a wave of heat through the air. Zara instinctively ducked, her heart pounding in her chest. The enemy had broken through the outer defenses, and the first wave of soldiers was charging toward the palace gates. "Kellen!" she shouted, but when she looked up, he was already moving. He stepped forward, his hand raised once more. This time, however, it was not a barrier he conjured, but a weapon-an energy beam that shot from his palm and obliterated the first line of enemy soldiers. They crumpled to the ground in an instant, their bodies disintegrating into nothingness. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen anything like it. Kellen didn't stop. With each movement, each gesture, he seemed to bend the world around him. The very air crackled with energy as he moved through the battlefield, effortlessly dismantling the enemy's forces. Soldiers fell, their weapons useless against the overwhelming power he commanded. It was as if Kellen had become something otherworldly himself. Zara, standing at the edge of the chaos, watched in awe. Her husband, the quiet, gentle man she had married, was no longer the same. He was a force of nature, a being of unimaginable power. And yet, even as she marveled at his strength, she couldn't help but feel a growing sense of fear. What had he become? And why had he hidden this side of himself for so long? A part of her felt betrayed. She had spent years believing she knew Kellen, believing that his simplicity was a part of what made him special. But now, she was faced with the terrifying reality that she had never truly understood him. He had been hiding his power, his true nature, from her all this time. Why? What was he afraid of? "Zara!" Kellen's voice broke through her thoughts, and she turned to see him standing beside her, his expression hard. "You need to get to safety. There's more to come." But Zara didn't want to leave. She couldn't. This was her kingdom, her people, and she wasn't about to stand by while they were destroyed. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I'm staying. I'm not running." Kellen's eyes softened for a moment, but the urgency in his voice remained. "Zara, you don't understand. What's coming next is beyond anything we've faced. I'm not just protecting you. I'm protecting the entire world. You have to trust me." The words cut through her like a knife. Trust, the very thing she had placed in him all these years. But now, with the truth laid bare before her, she couldn't help but question everything. The ground trembled again, and Zara's thoughts were interrupted by the appearance of a massive enemy warship that descended from the sky. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, towering and dark, with glowing red symbols etched along its hull. It hovered just above the palace, casting a long shadow over the battlefield. Her heart raced. "What is that?" she whispered. Kellen's expression grew darker. "It's their leader, the one who controls everything. If we don't stop it now, the battle will be lost." Zara's mind raced. She had seen Kellen destroy enemies with ease, but this was different. The warship was a force of nature in itself, and she could feel its power resonating through the air. Without another word, Kellen stepped forward, his energy crackling in the air around him. His hand was raised, and Zara could feel the surge of power building once more. This time, it wasn't just a shield or a blast, it was something far more dangerous, far more powerful. As Kellen prepared for what would be his greatest attack yet, Zara finally understood. She had always known her world was at the center of something much bigger, but now she realized just how small she had been in comparison to the forces surrounding them. Kellen wasn't just her husband. He was a protector, a force that had been waiting for this moment, this battle, his entire life. And now, as the fate of their world hung in the balance, Zara knew that she had no choice but to trust him completely. The battle was far from over, but with Kellen by her side, Zara finally understood the true power of the man she had married, and with that knowledge, she prepared herself for whatever came next. The battlefield had fallen eerily quiet for a moment, the chaotic sounds of laser fire and explosions now replaced by a heavy, almost suffocating silence. The massive warship above the palace hung like a dark omen, its red symbols glowing ominously as it loomed over the land. Zara stood frozen, watching Kellen with a mix of awe and dread, still trying to process the power she had witnessed. Her husband, the man she had believed to be nothing more than a quiet, unassuming companion, was now her only hope. Kellen's gaze remained locked on the warship, his eyes burning with determination. But Zara could see the strain in his features, the tension in his shoulders. He was exerting himself. She could feel the weight of it in the air around them. The shield he had created to protect the palace still shimmered, but she could see the energy flickering, as if even that barrier was struggling against the overwhelming force of the enemy. "Kellen," Zara whispered, her voice shaky. "What are we going to do?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he closed his eyes, his expression one of intense concentration. Zara took a step closer to him, her heart pounding in her chest. The questions were overwhelming, but there was no time to ask them now. The warship was hovering above them, and the enemy was just waiting for the right moment to strike. Kellen's eyes snapped open, and for the first time, Zara saw a flicker of vulnerability in them. He wasn't invincible. Despite the immense power he wielded, there was something else, something deeper that he was afraid of. She could feel it, as if the air between them had thickened with an unspoken truth. "I can't hold this much longer," he admitted, his voice tight. "The energy is too great. I need you to get to safety, Zara. There's only so much I can do." Zara's heart twisted in her chest. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly, her resolve hardening. She had spent too long standing by, waiting for the answers. Now, with everything on the line, she wouldn't turn away. Kellen's eyes softened for a moment, but his expression remained focused. He was holding back something. Zara could sense it. The truth he had been hiding from her, the power that he had never shown her, was not just a weapon, it was a force that could change everything. Before she could say anything else, the silence was shattered by a deep, rumbling sound from the warship above. The air shimmered with energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. Zara barely had time to react before the enemy struck. A powerful beam of red light shot from the ship's core, cutting through the air like a blade. Aimed directly at the shield that protected the palace, Zara's heart stopped. The shield was flickering, its energy waning under the pressure of the attack. Kellen's face twisted with strain, his entire body trembling as he fought to keep the barrier intact. But the beam was too powerful, too overwhelming. She could see it in his eyes. He was pushing himself to the limit, but even his power had its bounds. "No," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We can't let them break through." Kellen's hand shook as he tried to hold the shield in place. His expression was grim, but there was a fire in his eyes that Zara had never seen before. "This is it," he said, barely audible. "I need you to trust me now." Before Zara could respond, Kellen's body glowed with a brilliant light, brighter than anything she had ever seen. His power surged, crackling through the air like a storm, and the beam from the warship hit the shield with an earth-shattering force. The energy exploded outward, sending shockwaves through the palace, rattling the walls and shaking the very ground beneath them. Zara was thrown back, her body slamming against the cold stone floor. Pain shot through her, but she barely registered it. Her eyes shot up, and what she saw made her blood run cold. Kellen stood at the center of the storm, his body glowing with an ethereal light, a force of pure energy. His eyes were locked on the warship above, and in that moment, Zara realized that this wasn't just a battle for their kingdom. This was something far greater. Kellen wasn't just fighting to protect her or their people. He was fighting to protect the very fabric of their world, the balance of all things. With a single movement, Kellen raised his hand, and the air itself seemed to bend around him. The power he unleashed was unlike anything Zara had ever witnessed. The red beam from the warship faltered, its energy scattering as Kellen's light surged forward, tearing through the attack like a blade through cloth. The ground trembled as the two forces collided, and Zara felt the weight of it, as if the very universe itself was holding its breath. For a brief moment, everything was still. The warship's beam flickered, then dissipated, and Kellen's light grew even brighter, engulfing the entire battlefield. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she watched her husband, the man who had hidden his true power for so long, finally unleashed the full extent of his abilities. The warship above them groaned, its engines sputtering as Kellen's power surged through the air. With a final, deafening crack, the ship exploded, disintegrating in a flash of blinding light. The shockwave from the explosion sent a powerful gust of wind through the palace, knocking Zehra off her feet once more. When the light faded, everything was silent. Zehra blinked, trying to process what she had just witnessed. The warship was gone, reduced to nothing but debris floating in the air. The battlefield had fallen silent, the enemy forces scattered and disoriented. The shield that Kellen had created around the palace was still intact. Shimmering softly in the aftermath of the attack, Kellen stood in the center of it all, breathing heavily, his body still glowing faintly with the remnants of his power. His eyes met Zehra's, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of what he had just done. He had saved them, no, not just them. He had saved their entire world. Zehra's legs shook as she stood, finally making her way toward him. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Her touch gentle but firm. Kellen's eyes softened, and for a moment, he seemed almost fragile. "It's not over," he said quietly, his voice hoarse. "This was only the first step." Zehra nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and fear. She didn't know what was coming next, but she knew one thing for certain. The man she had married was no ordinary prince. He was something far more powerful, something far more dangerous, and she would stand by his side, no matter what came next. The dust from the explosion still hung in the air, thick and heavy, as Zehra stood there. Her eyes locked on Kellen. The warship that had threatened to destroy them all was nothing more than a cloud of debris now, the remnants of its metallic structure drifting aimlessly in the sky. The battlefield was eerily quiet, the aftermath of the explosion leaving a strange calm in its wake. But Zehra's mind was anything but calm. She had always believed that her world, her kingdom, was safe. She had thought herself in control, the ruler of a powerful people, surrounded by armies and advisors who would always protect her. But now, after everything that had just happened, she realized how wrong she had been. Kellen, her husband, had shown her that the balance of their world was far more fragile than she could have ever imagined. The power he had unleashed to destroy the warship was beyond anything she had ever conceived. Yet there was still so much she didn't understand. The look in Kellen's eyes, the way his body trembled with the aftermath of his power, left her with a sense of unease. She had seen him fight, seen him destroy an enemy, but there was something deeper beneath the surface that still eluded her. She needed answers. As if sensing her thoughts, Kellen turned to face her, his expression solemn. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead, his hand shaking slightly from the effort of what he had just done. The light that had surrounded him during the battle faded, leaving him looking more like the man she had married, tired, worn, yet somehow still powerful. "You saved us," Zehra said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. "But there's more to this, isn't there? You've been hiding something from me, Kellen. What are you really?" His eyes met hers, and for a moment, there was hesitation, something in him faltering, a vulnerability that he rarely showed. But then, with a deep sigh, he spoke, his voice tinged with the weight of 1,000 secrets. "I'm not from here, Zehra," he began, his words heavy with the burden of truth. "Not from this world. I've come from a place far beyond your kingdom, a dimension that lies outside the boundaries of time and space. My people, the ones I've come from, have watched over countless worlds, ensuring their survival. But I was never supposed to be here. I was never meant to live among your people. I was sent to protect, to guide, to keep the balance." Zehra's breath caught in her throat. The man standing before her, the one she had shared her life with, was not what he seemed. He was a protector, an ancient being from another dimension, with powers far beyond what she could comprehend. "Then why did you stay hidden?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why not tell me? Why not let me know what you really are?" Kellen's gaze dropped to the ground, as if the weight of her questions was too much to bear. "Because I couldn't. If I had told you, you would have never trusted me. Your world isn't ready for the truth, Zehra. The balance of the universe is delicate. The moment someone from my dimension steps into a new world, it shifts. The energy shifts. And once that happens, the doors to other dimensions begin to open. Dangerous forces that would destroy everything can slip through." Zehra's mind spun, trying to make sense of the words he was saying. "You've been protecting us. From what?" "From them," Kellen replied, his voice hardening. "The ones who are coming. They're not just invaders. They are beings who thrive on destruction, on chaos. They've been waiting for this moment, for the cracks in the fabric of the universe to open. And I've been trying to keep that from happening for centuries. Zahra took a step back, her heart pounding. The enemy they had just faced wasn't the only threat. There was something far worse lurking, something that Kellen had been trying to stop for years. And now it was only a matter of time before it found its way into their world. I don't understand, Zahra said, her voice shaking. Why did you marry me, Kellen? Why did you stay here, in my world, knowing the danger? What am I to you? Kellen's eyes softened, a deep sorrow behind them. I married you because I fell in love with you, Zahra. I never expected this life. But when I met you, when I saw the strength in you, I knew you were the key. You were the one who could help me protect this world. Zahra felt a surge of emotion flood through her. She had always wondered why Kellen had been so patient, so gentle with her. Why he had never once tried to push her into any role she wasn't ready for. He had always respected her strength, her leadership, and now she understood why. He had seen something in her that she hadn't even recognized in herself. You said the balance is fragile, Zahra said slowly. What does that mean for us now? For this world? Kellen's expression darkened again, and for a moment, he seemed lost in thought. It means that the fight isn't over. The invaders we faced were only the beginning. They were a test, a trial run. The real enemy, the ones I've been trying to stop, will be coming soon. They will break through every barrier, every shield. And when they do, they will try to take this world for themselves. Zahra's mind raced, and fear settled in her chest. This was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. Then what do we do? Kellen met her gaze, and in that moment, Zahra saw the weight of everything he had been carrying. We fight, together. Zahra's heart beat faster. She had always been a warrior, always ready to lead her people. But now, the stakes were higher than ever before. The world she had fought to protect was on the brink of destruction. And the only chance they had was to stand together, united in the face of the unknown. Where do we begin? She asked, her voice steady now, a fire burning in her chest. Kellen smiled. A small but genuine smile. We begin by preparing for the worst. But we also begin by trusting each other because, if we don't, everything we fought for will be lost. Zahra nodded, feeling a sense of resolve settle over her. The battle was far from over. The real war was just beginning. But with Kellen by her side, no longer a mystery. No longer a simple man, she knew they could face whatever came next. Together, they would fight to protect their world. And this time, Zahra would stand beside him not just as his queen, but as his equal. The calm after the storm didn't last long. The shattered remnants of the enemy's warship still drifted in the air. But there was no time to celebrate their victory. Zahra's mind was racing, the weight of Kellen's words pressing down on her. There were more threats out there, and this battle was only the beginning. She had always believed herself prepared for anything, but nothing had prepared her for the truth about her husband. The world she had so carefully ruled was now in greater danger than ever, and the quiet, unassuming man she had married was no longer the simple prince she had once known. She turned to Kellen, who stood at the edge of the palace balcony, his back to her. His posture was stiff, his shoulders tense. The aftermath of the battle had taken its toll on him, but there was something else in his expression, something deeper, a shadow of something unspoken. Kellen, Zahra called softly, stepping closer to him. Her voice was filled with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and a need for answers. You said they're coming, the ones you've been protecting us from. Who are they? And why did you wait so long to tell me the truth? Kellen didn't turn around immediately. The silence between them stretched, thick with unspoken thoughts. Finally, he spoke, his voice strained. They are the Seekers, he said, the words barely above a whisper. They are beings who exist beyond the fabric of our reality. They are predators, drawn to worlds that are rich with life and energy. They feed on chaos, on destruction. And when they find a world like ours, they tear it apart, piece by piece, until there is nothing left. Zahra's heart sank as she tried to process the enormity of what he was saying. But why? Why hasn't anyone stopped them before? Kellen turned slowly, his face a mask of exhaustion and determination. Because they are ancient, Zahra, older than anything you can imagine. Their power is not something we can fight with weapons or armies. They are a force of nature. I've been trying to keep them from crossing into this world for centuries, but now the rift between our dimensions is growing wider. They can sense it. Zahra's mind spun. A force of nature, a predator from beyond reality. How could they fight something like that? How could she protect her kingdom from something that didn't even belong to their world? You said the rift is growing wider, Zahra said, trying to keep her voice steady. How long do we have? What do we do now? Kellen's gaze softened, and for the first time, she saw the weariness in his eyes. The rift has already opened. The Seekers are already here, but they are still in the shadows, waiting. They have agents, creatures that can slip between worlds unnoticed. They've been here for years, manipulating events, causing chaos in small ways, preparing for the moment when they can reveal themselves fully. A chill ran down Zahra's spine as she realized the true extent of the threat they were facing. These agents, these creatures, had already been among them, moving in the shadows, pulling the strings. Her mind raced back over the years, the strange, unexplained events that had occurred in her kingdom, the sudden rise in criminal activity, the unexplained disappearances, the whispers of dark forces. Were those the signs? Had she been blind to the truth all along? Then how do we stop them? Zahra asked, her voice firm with determination. We can't wait for them to strike first. We have to act. Kellen nodded, his eyes dark with regret. I've spent my entire life protecting this world from them, but I've been alone in this fight. I wasn't supposed to let anyone know what I am. I thought I could keep them at bay, but I was wrong. Now, they know about me. They know about us. Zahra's heart clenched. You've been fighting alone all this time? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me help you? I couldn't risk it, Kellen said, his voice strained. If you knew, you would have been a target. I had to keep you safe. I thought if I could protect you long enough, maybe they would leave us alone. But now, his words trailed off, and Zahra could see the guilt in his eyes. It was a heavy burden, one he had carried alone for far too long. She reached out, placing a hand on his arm, her touch grounding him. We're in this together now, she said softly. You're not alone anymore. Kellen's gaze met hers, and for a moment, the intensity between them was palpable. She could see the storm of emotions swirling behind his eyes, the regret, the fear, the hope. He had been carrying the weight of an entire world on his shoulders, trying to protect her, to protect them all. But now, the time for secrecy was over. The time for action had come. We need to gather our forces, Kellen said, his voice firm again. We need to prepare for the next phase. The Seekers won't be content to stay in the shadows much longer. They'll make their move soon, and when they do, we have to be ready. Zahra nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settle on her shoulders. Her kingdom, her people, were in danger, and it was up to her to protect them. She had always been a warrior at heart, but now the stakes were higher than they had ever been. This wasn't just a battle for her throne, it was a fight for the survival of everything she held dear. We'll start immediately, Zahra said, her voice steady with resolve. We'll build our defenses, gather allies, and prepare for the fight ahead. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Kellen's expression softened, a flicker of hope shining through the exhaustion in his eyes. Together, he repeated, as if the weight of those words carried more meaning than they ever had before. And with that, they turned toward the horizon, ready to face the unknown together. The battle was far from over, and the Seekers were coming. But Zahra knew one thing for certain: she would not face it alone. With Kellen by her side, and her kingdom standing strong, they would fight until the very end, whatever the cost. The air was thick with anticipation, a sense of foreboding that seemed to hang over everything. The war had only just begun, and already, the weight of what was to come pressed down on Zahra like a storm on the horizon. She stood on the balcony of the palace, her eyes scanning the horizon, searching for any sign of the enemy. But the land below seemed unnervingly still. It was almost as if the world was holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. Kellen stood beside her, his presence a quiet force at her side. He had been her rock through the chaos of the past weeks, guiding her through decisions that were far beyond the scope of her experience. The truth he had revealed about himself, about their world, had shaken her to her core, but it also brought clarity. She understood now that the stakes were much higher than just the survival of her kingdom. The balance of the entire universe was at risk, and somehow she was at the center of it. "Do you think they'll come today?" Zara asked, her voice softer than usual. It wasn't just a question about the enemy, it was a question about everything. About the choices she had made, about what was still to come. Kellen didn't answer immediately. His gaze was distant, focused on something far beyond the horizon. Something that Zara couldn't see. "They are already here," he said quietly. "And they've been watching us for a long time." Zara felt a cold shiver crawl up her spine. The Seekers were a force of nature, beings that thrived on destruction, chaos, and the unraveling of worlds. The thought that they had been lurking in the shadows for years, pulling strings and influencing events from afar, was enough to make her blood run cold. How had she not seen it before? How had she been so blind to the signs? But then she remembered what Kellen had said: you weren't supposed to see them. Not yet. The time for secrets was over. Now, they had no choice but to face the truth. Kellen turned to her, his expression unreadable, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Fear, worry. No, it wasn't fear. It was determination. He was ready, and he needed her to be ready too. "I've kept this world safe for so long, Zara," Kellen said, his voice low. "But now, the rift is too wide. They will come, and when they do, it will be unlike anything we've faced before. We will have to fight in ways we've never fought. This isn't just a battle of armies or weapons, it's a battle of will, of strength, of trust." She nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle deep in her chest. Trust. She had trusted him with everything. But now it was more than just their bond, it was the survival of the entire world. She was no longer just a princess or a ruler. She was the last line of defense, and Kellen had made her see that. "We fight together, Kellen," she said, her voice steady. "You've taught me to be strong, to trust in myself, and now, I will stand with you, whatever it takes." Kellen looked at her, his gaze softening for a moment. There was a vulnerability in his eyes that she hadn't seen before, a fleeting glimpse of the man behind the power. But then it was gone, replaced by the warrior he had become. "I never wanted to put you in this position," he said, his voice rough. "But now, there is no turning back. This fight is ours." Zara's heart beat faster as the realization hit her. She wasn't just fighting to protect her kingdom anymore. She was fighting for the very balance of existence. And Kellen wasn't the only one who had been hiding things. She had been hiding from the truth, as well, the truth that her role in this was far greater than she had ever known. Her strength, her courage, her heart, it all had a purpose now. She was meant to lead, to fight, to protect, not just as a queen, but as something more. She was the key to their survival. The sound of footsteps echoed from behind them, breaking the heavy silence. Zara turned to see her commanders, soldiers, and trusted advisors gathered at the entrance of the balcony. Their faces were grim, but their eyes held a spark of resolve. They were ready as they could be. The palace had become a fortress, its walls reinforced, its defenses bolstered, but no amount of armor could protect them from what was coming. "We've gathered the last of the reinforcements, Your Highness," one of her generals reported, his voice steady despite the fear that lingered in his eyes. "The army is ready to march at your command." Zara took a deep breath, her gaze flicking to Kellen before returning to her people. They were all looking to her now, not just for leadership, but for hope. She had always known this moment would come when she would have to stand firm, to be the pillar her people could rely on. But now, with the weight of Kellen's truth in her heart, she understood just how much was at stake. "This is our world," Zara said, her voice strong and clear, echoing through the courtyard. "And we will fight for it, with everything we have. No enemy, no force, no darkness will take it from us. We are united. We are strong, and together, we will show them that the people of Kelthan will never bow to destruction." Her words seemed to hang in the air for a moment, the intensity of them reverberating through the hearts of everyone who heard them. The soldiers straightened, their faces set with determination. The generals nodded, their eyes burning with resolve. Zara could feel the unity of her people, their belief in her and in Kellen. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a battle for the soul of their world. "Let's show them what we're made of," Kellen said, His voice low but filled with an intensity that matched hers. Zahra felt a surge of power, a fire igniting deep inside her. This was their fight. This was their moment. As the soldiers prepared for battle, Zahra took one last look at the horizon. The skies had darkened, clouds swirling as if in response to the coming storm. The Seekers were out there waiting, but so were they. The battle that would determine the fate of their world was about to begin. Zahra stepped forward, her heart filled with a quiet, unwavering certainty. The future was uncertain, the stakes higher than ever before. But with Kellen by her side and her people standing strong behind her, she knew that they would fight until the very end. And no matter what came next, they would face it together.